Crowds of nobles and dignitaries gathered to witness an extraordinary wedding, one that would unite two powerful kingdoms, England and France, in an attempt to bring temporary peace during the Hundred Years' War. Bride Isabella of Valois was a French princess of barely 6 years old, daughter of King Charles VI of France, who was struggling with bouts of madness, and Queen Isabeau of Bavaria. Isabella had grown up amidst the political turbulence and fragile alliances of the French court. Her early life had been shaped not by the innocence of childhood alone, but by the shadow of her father's mental illness and the constant threat of civil strife. He was considered a living symbol of hope for political stability, and her marriage would carry the weight of national diplomacy. Her groom, King Richard II of England, was 29 years old, a man whose reign had been marked by extravagance, political disputes, and the careful balancing of noble factions. Unlike Isabella, Richard was seasoned in matters of governance and power. For him, this marriage was not only a chance to secure peace with France, but also an opportunity to reinforce his own legitimacy and influence among the English nobility. Age difference, 23 years, was extreme even for royal marriages of the period, yet it was accepted as a necessary concession to political strategy. The wedding itself was a spectacle of wealth and ceremony. Westminster Abbey, heart of English royalty, was adorned with tapestries, gold, and fragrant flowers, while nobles from across England and France attended. The bride, though only a child, was dressed in luxurious silks and jewels, carefully selected to reflect the dignity of her new role. Despite her youth, Isabella's presence carried an unmistakable symbolic weight. She embodied the hopes of two nations, reconciliation and peace. The union was explicitly unconsummated due to Isabella's tender age, a practice occasionally observed in medieval diplomacy when political marriages involved child brides. She was to remain in England under the care of tutors and ladies-in-waiting, trained in the customs, language, and etiquette of the English court. Her education was not merely about refinement, it was also preparation for her role as a living symbol of the alliance between two powerful kingdoms. Richard II, known for his often unpredictable temperament, reportedly treated Isabella with gentleness and paternal care, viewing her less as a wife and more as a cherished child within his court. This unusual dynamic created a curious blend of affection and political necessity. The English people and visiting dignitaries, Isabella appeared as a figure of grace and innocence. Her role was entirely political. Presence a reminder that the fragile peace between England and France depended on her very existence. From the French perspective, Isabella's marriage represented a carefully negotiated compromise. France secured a truce that would last for several decades, while England obtained a strategic alliance through the young queen. Both nations understood that her value lay not in personal affection or future progeny, at least not immediately, as a living emblem of diplomacy. The marriage of Richard II and Isabella of Valois is remembered today not for romantic notions, but for the complex interplay of power, youth, and diplomacy. It highlights the realities of medieval politics, where the lives of children could be intertwined with the destinies of kingdoms. Isabella's wedding was more than a ceremony. It was a political instrument, a message of unity and hope, and a testament to the ways in which royal children were used to secure alliances in an age dominated by war strategy and fragile treaties. This union, at once spectacular and deeply unusual, set the stage for a life marked by diplomatic responsibility, personal resilience, and historical significance, beginning a journey that would see Isabella navigate the courts of England and France amidst unprecedented challenges for a girl of her age. Isabella of Valois was born in 1389, the daughter of King Charles VI of France, famously known as Charles the Mad, and Queen Isabeau of Bavaria. From her earliest days, Isabella's life was framed by the uncertainty and volatility of the French court. Her father, though a legitimate monarch, suffered from recurrent mental breakdowns, which which left the governance of France in the hands of competing nobles and advisors. Political power shifted frequently between factions, creating a climate of constant intrigue and instability. Mother Queen Isabeau was a strong and politically astute figure, deeply involved in court politics and the management of France's fragile alliances. Under her guidance, Isabella learned from an early age the importance of family loyalty, diplomacy, and survival. While other children might have spent their youth in play, Isabella's upbringing was colored by lessons in court etiquette, negotiation, and political awareness, as she grew up in an environment where even minor decisions could have national consequences. France itself was under tremendous pressure. 100 Years' War, long and brutal conflict with England, devastated much of the countryside, disrupted trade, and left populations vulnerable to famine and disease. Towns were fortified, castles garrisoned, and both kingdoms relied heavily on strategic marriages to forge temporary peace or strengthen alliances. In this context, Isabella was not merely a princess. She was a key instrument of diplomacy, whose future marriage could influence the fate of nations. By 1396, Isabella's life took a decisive turn. Negotiations between England and France focused on her marriage to King Richard II, a plan designed to cement a truce between the two nations. The terms of the agreement were precise. Isabella would bring a substantial dowry, England would gain a formal alliance, and a long-term truce would be established, temporarily halting hostilities in the 100 Years' War. Even at a young age, Isabella's role in diplomacy was monumental. She became a symbol of hope for a kingdom weary of war, a living emblem that peace was possible, even if fragile. Her education and upbringing were strategically shaped to prepare her for this destiny. Tutors ensured she learned not only French customs and courtly manners, but also languages, etiquette, and the subtle dynamics of court politics. By the time she left for England, Isabella was being molded into a young woman capable of representing France's interests abroad. Yet despite these pressures, Isabella remained a child. Her daily life included the presence of nurses, tutors, and companions. She was surrounded by luxury that reflected her royal status. The contrast between her youthful innocence and the enormous political responsibilities she carried made her life uniquely challenging. She was not just a princess growing up in a royal household. She was a living instrument of statecraft, whose marriage would be scrutinized by two powerful nations. In sum, Isabella's early years illustrate the precarious position of royal children in medieval Europe. She was simultaneously daughter, princess, and a political tool, shaped by the turbulence of her father's reign and the wider conflicts of the era. Childhood foreshadowed a life where personal agency and political necessity were inseparable, and where every step, from education to marriage, was dictated by the demands of diplomacy and survival. In 1397, Isabella of Valois, now 7 years old, embarked on a journey that would forever change her life. She left France to join the English court. Accompanied by a retinue of French nobles and guardians, she traveled across the Channel to marry King Richard II of England in a formal ceremony at Calais, a key English-controlled port in France. The following year, she was crowned Queen of England at Westminster Abbey, draped in regal splendor that belied her tender age. Though far too young to perform the traditional duties of a queen, Isabella's presence carried immense political significance. She was a living bridge between England and France, embodying the fragile truce negotiated between two warring kingdoms. Every gesture, every appearance reinforced the hope of lasting peace. Richard II, despite the extraordinary age difference, reportedly treated Isabella with gentleness and care, more like a daughter than a bride. He ensured she was provided with the best tutors, companions, and caretakers, cultivating an environment in which she could learn and adapt to the intricacies of the English court. Her education was rigorous, covering language, etiquette, history, and the subtleties of court diplomacy. In this way, Isabella was gradually transformed from a child into a figure capable of performing her symbolic and ceremonial roles. Life at court presented its own challenges. Isabella had to navigate a world of strict courtly etiquette and political intrigue, surrounded by adults whose alliances and ambitions constantly shifted. She adapted quickly, forming friendships with other children of the English nobility, gaining fluency in English, which allowed her to communicate and integrate into her new home more effectively. Coronation at Westminster Abbey was a highly symbolic event. At 8 years old, Isabella became a child queen, representing not only the union of two royal houses, but also the broader aspirations of diplomacy between England and France. Ceremony emphasized her innocence and youth, while simultaneously projecting power and legitimacy. Despite the ceremonial nature of her role, Isabella was observant and intelligent. She began to notice the political tensions within the English court, the rivalries among nobles, and the subtle maneuvers of advisors around the king. Even as a child, she learned the importance of diplomacy, patience, and discretion, skills that would serve her later in life. Her early years as queen were thus a delicate balance. She was both a child in need of care and a symbol of political unity. This dual role shaped her personality, fostering resilience, grace, and adaptability. By the time she reached adolescence, Isabella was not merely a passive figurehead, but an aware and perceptive participant in the ceremonial and social life of the court, capable of understanding the complex political world around her. In short, Isabella's life in England was more than a gilded confinement. It was a training ground for diplomacy and survival, where she developed the skills and intelligence that would allow her to navigate the treacherous political landscapes of both England and France in the years to come. For a time, Isabella's life at the English court was protected by the affections of King Richard II and the ceremonial prestige of her role. Beneath the surface, England was simmering with political unrest. Richard's reign had long been marked by extravagance, favoritism, and unpopular policies, which alienated many of his nobles. Stability of the kingdom was fragile, and rebellion was brewing. Central threat came from Henry Bolingbroke, son of John of Gaunt and Richard's cousin. Henry had been exiled by Richard due to political disputes. His supporters in England remained loyal and resentful of the king's rule. Tensions escalated into open rebellion in 1399. With Henry landing in England with an army, quickly gathering support from nobles disillusioned with Richard's leadership. Amidst this turmoil, young Queen Isabella's safety became a pressing concern. She was moved to the Tower of London, a fortified palace offering protection but also isolating her from the larger court and political life. While Richard faced the unfolding crisis, Isabella remained under guard and supervision, aware, if only vaguely, the danger surrounding her and the instability of the monarchy she had joined as a child. Rebellion culminated in Richard's capture and deposition. Bolingbroke claimed the throne as King Henry IV. Richard was imprisoned in Pontefract Castle, where he eventually died under uncertain circumstances. For Isabella, now only 10 years old, news was devastating. The man who had treated her with care and affection, who had provided safety and education, was gone. Her status as queen was now meaningless in practical terms. She was no longer the child bride of a reigning king, but a political pawn in the machinations of a new monarch. Henry IV had intentions to use her for political advantage, even considering proposals for her to marry his son, the future Henry V, to further secure alliances. Isabella, however, showed remarkable resolve for a child. She refused to acknowledge Henry as her sovereign or marry into his family, displaying a loyalty to Richard that transcended her years. These events marked a profound turning point in Isabella's life. She was no longer merely a queen in waiting. She had experienced firsthand the fragility of power, the ruthlessness of politics, and the vulnerability of youth in a world dominated by ambition and war. Early exposure to such dramatic upheaval would shape her understanding of diplomacy, loyalty, and survival. lessons that would guide her through the next chapter of her life back in France. Even as a child, Isabella's life revealed the harsh realities of medieval politics. Personal bonds were secondary to dynastic ambition, and royal children, no matter how innocent, be swept into the turbulent currents of power struggles. Her story during this period is a testament to her resilience and her emerging political awareness, qualities that would define her brief but remarkable life. Following the deposition of Richard II and his subsequent death in captivity, Isabella of Valois found herself in a precarious and uncertain position. No longer Queen of England, she was effectively a child widow, a figure whose political value far outweighed her personal agency. Henry IV, now king, sought to consolidate his power and viewed Isabella as a potential asset. He proposed that she acknowledge him as her sovereign and even considered arranging her marriage to his son, the future Henry V, strengthen ties with France and legitimize his reign. However, Isabella, though only 11 years old, displayed remarkable resolve and loyalty. He refused to recognize Henry IV as her king and steadfastly declined any proposal to marry into the English royal family, remaining emotionally and politically attached to Richard II. Negotiations between England and France eventually secured her return home in 1401. Crossing the English Channel, Isabella left behind a childhood marked by grandeur, education, and ceremonial splendor, but also by isolation, political manipulation, and the trauma of losing her first husband. She returned to France under the careful supervision of her family and French officials, who sought to reinstate her within the political landscape while protecting her from further exploitation. France, however, was far from stable. The kingdom was embroiled in internal divisions, with the nobility split between rival factions vying for influence. The mental instability of her father, King Charles VI, continued to affect governance, creating a climate of uncertainty and power struggles. For Isabella, reintegration into the French court was not a simple return to family life. She was now a figure of diplomatic importance, whose status and previous marriage had made her a valuable political pawn. Despite these challenges, Isabella quickly adapted. She was received with sympathy, recognition, and care. She also had to navigate the complex dynamics of a court still recovering from decades of conflict. Her experiences in England, witnessing rebellion, deposition, and political maneuvering, had provided her with a unique understanding of diplomacy and survival. Isabella's return marked both a personal and political transition. She moved from being a child bride in a foreign land to a young woman reclaiming her position in her homeland. She had survived the turbulence of the English court and returned with lessons in loyalty, resilience, and political awareness that would serve her in the next stage of her life. Her second marriage, which would once again place her at the heart of France's noble and political world. Her homecoming was thus more than a physical journey. It was a reassertion of identity, agency, and political relevance, setting the stage for her eventual role as the Duchess of Orleans. By the early 1400s, Isabella of Valois had returned to a France still entangled in political instability and noble rivalries. The kingdom, recovering from years of civil unrest and the pressures of the 100 Years' War, relied heavily on strategic marriages to secure alliances and consolidate power. It was in this turbulent context that Isabella's second marriage was arranged. In 1406, at the age of 16, Isabella married Charles, Duke of Orleans, a young nobleman of 11 years who was himself heir to one of the most powerful ducal families in France. Unlike her first marriage, which had been purely political, this union offered mutual respect, companionship, and a return to her cultural roots. Charles was part of the inner circle of French royalty. His family's influence placed Isabella firmly back within the upper echelons of French political life. Their wedding was celebrated with splendor and ceremony, reflecting the wealth, prestige, and political importance of both families. Isabella's position as Duchess offered her greater personal agency than she had experienced in England. She now had opportunities to participate in the intellectual and cultural life of the French court, patronize the arts, and involve herself in diplomatic correspondence. While still young, Isabella embraced her new role with dignity and intelligence. She navigated the expectations placed upon her as a duchess, overseeing her household, managing estates, and learning the intricacies of French court politics. Her education in England, combined with her innate political acumen, allowed her to act as an effective mediator and representative of her family's interests. This second marriage also marked a turning point in her personal life. For the first time, Isabella experienced relative stability, surrounded by familiar language, customs, and culture. She was no longer a foreign child in a foreign court. She was a young woman in a position of influence, capable of shaping her environment and contributing meaningfully to her family and kingdom. Despite her youth, Isabella's presence carried weight. Her previous status as Queen of England and daughter of Charles VI lent her a unique prestige among the French nobility. She became a symbol of continuity, a reminder that diplomacy, loyalty, and strategic marriage still serve as instruments of stability amid the ongoing turbulence of medieval France. Her life as Duchess of Orleans marked the beginning of a new chapter, one in which she could assert influence, cultivate personal and political relationships, and prepare herself for the challenges that would come with civil war, her husband's captivity, and the responsibilities of motherhood. Following her marriage to Charles, Duke of Orleans, Isabella found herself at the center of a France increasingly torn apart by internal conflict. The kingdom was divided between two powerful factions, the Armagnacs, aligned with her husband's family, and the Burgundians, who sought to dominate the French political landscape through alliances and intrigue. This civil war, layered atop the ongoing challenges of the Hundred Years' War, created a dangerous and unpredictable environment for all members of the royal family. As Duchess of Orleans, Isabella's role was not purely ceremonial. She was deeply involved in supporting her husband and his family, managing estates, and overseeing the education and welfare of their children. Though still young, she had already experienced the volatility of courts and politics in England, giving her a rare maturity and insight for her age. During the height of the Civil War, Isabella worked to maintain alliances and protect her family from both political and military threats. Her efforts included negotiating with neighboring nobles, safeguarding the family estates from raids, and providing aid to civilians affected by the conflict. Chroniclers of the time noted her compassion, highlighting that even amid political turbulence, Isabella remained attentive to humanitarian concerns, distributing food, medical aid, and shelter to war victims. War also brought personal anxieties. Her husband, Charles, faced threats of capture and political marginalization. Isabella's position required delicate diplomacy. She had to uphold her family's interests while ensuring their survival. Her upbringing, first in France and then in England, equipped her with the skills to navigate rival factions, demonstrating tact, resilience, and strategic thinking. Despite the dangers and stress, Isabella maintained her cultural and intellectual pursuits. She continued to foster connections among France's nobility, patronize the arts, and support education for her children. In doing so, she combined the responsibilities of a political actor with the grace and compassion expected of a duchess, leaving a lasting impression on those who witnessed her conduct. The Civil War period was transformative. Isabella evolved from a child bride and queen in name to a young woman capable of balancing the demands of leadership, family, and diplomacy. She became a stabilizing presence in a fractured kingdom, proving that even in times of unrest, careful strategy and personal integrity could influence outcomes and protect her loved ones. Her experience during the French Civil War underscored a vital lesson. In a world defined by violence, factionalism, and ambition, Isabella's intelligence, empathy, and resilience were as crucial as her noble birth in ensuring her survival and continued influence. Despite the resilience and intelligence Isabella had displayed throughout her life, the physical toll of repeated pregnancies, the stress of political upheaval, and the limitations of medieval medicine began to weigh heavily on her. By her late teens, she suffered from persistent health issues that made the management of her household, estates, and political responsibilities increasingly challenging. Even as her strength declined, Isabella remained deeply involved in governance and diplomacy. She oversaw her children's education, managed her family's territories, and maintained her correspondence with allies and nobles across France. Her careful attention to diplomacy helped sustain her family's influence during a period marked by factional rivalries and ongoing conflict. Beyond politics, Isabella was remembered for her humanitarian efforts. Chroniclers highlighted her compassion for those affected by war, her involvement in charitable works, and her ability to balance power with empathy. She remained a figure of stability and moral authority, respected both for her noble birth and for her personal character. Tragically, Isabella's life was cut short. In 1409, at the age of only 20, she died. Death left her husband, Charles, and her family to continue navigating the challenges of French politics without her guiding presence. She left no surviving children from her marriage. Her influence endured through the alliances she maintained, the estates she managed, and the legacy of resilience and diplomacy she exemplified. Isabella of Valois' life, though brief, stands as a remarkable testament to courage, intelligence, and perseverance in an age when young women, especially royal daughters, were often treated as political pawns. She transcended the limitations of her time, moving from a child bride in a foreign court to a duchess deeply involved in the political and cultural life of France. Her story reflects the broader realities of medieval Europe. Youth and innocence could be overshadowed by political necessity, but even within these constraints, individuals could exercise agency, influence events, and leave an enduring mark on history. Isabella's life remains a compelling example of how resilience, intellect, and compassion shape the destiny of nations, even through the lens of personal hardship and early mortality.